Welcome back to Live with AI Virtual CES 2022, a webcast series featuring industry experts and thought leaders on the topics of ADAS and autonomy, along with virtual demonstrations of AEye's Foresight LiDAR platform, a 2022 CES Innovation Award winner. Now, Foresight is a solid-state and software-centric solution that adapts and optimizes its scan patterns in real time. All of the broadcasts over the last 2 days have aired live on AEye's social media channels, which includes Facebook and Twitter, as well as LinkedIn and YouTube. All of those broadcasts are archived there. So if you missed anything the last 2 days or you'd like to watch something again, you can find it there on AEye's social media. And all of the interviews with the industry experts that you've been seeing over the last 2 days will eventually be archived on AutoVision News. We had a snowstorm here in Detroit that temporarily gave us a glitch, but we're going to catch up now with Rick Tewell. He's AEye's Chief Operating Officer. He joined AEye from Velodyne LiDAR, where he served most recently as Chief Operating Officer. During his career, Rick has held progressively senior roles in both hardware and embedded software across industry-leading high-technology companies, including Freescale and NXP. He brings more than 30 years of engineering and operations experience, including 2 decades in automotive electronics, here to share his thoughts and his industry predictions as we go forward for a brand new year. Rick Tewell. Good morning, Rick.
Good morning, Carl.
Hey, glad you could be with us. So, technical difficulties aside this morning, let's dive in. Let's try this again. Tell us about your role and your responsibilities at AEye.
Well, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of AEye. Primarily, my role is involved with manufacturing, getting the products, built and getting them into the hands of customers. So that involves everything from product engineering to all of the work involved with DFX, whether that's design for quality, design for manufacturability, design for cost, all of those things that are factored in. So really taking the product from the R&D team, getting it into a product engineering format where we really call that packing the suitcase, then getting it out to the manufacturers to build, and then scaling for mass production as customer demands increases. So that's primarily what I do at AEye.
Gotcha. And so we're talking about manufacturing, talking about the AEye business model. You, Rick, at AEye, you have a unique business model. So I feel like this is a natural transition. Let's talk about your unique business model and why it's sort of set apart when you look at everything else in the industry.
Yeah, so one of the areas of our business model is we're pretty automotive centric. Not that the company is automotive centric from a product standpoint. We sell into the industrial mobility markets as well. Sure. But we designed the LiDAR with this intention for it to be an automotive long range type of a product. When you think of automotive grade, it doesn't mean just one thing. Right. Mm-hmm. So, it's environmental, which we all think of. Is it cold? Is it hot? Can it stand vibration, moisture, yes, corrosivity? The automotive environment is extremely difficult to have a product, especially one that might be on the outside of the vehicle. But then it also means automotive grade parts, automotive grade manufacturing processes for traceability, functional safety, long-term support to build a mature, ruggedized LiDAR product, right? And then, of course, once you are in the automotive manufacturing cycle, there's automotive cost advantages. We've talked about that multiple times in the past about how we're able to leverage the automotive supply chain in order to build the products for not just the automotive markets, but for our industrial mobility markets as well. And then, of course, the feature sets are primed for our automotive customer needs, which are generally speaking what we talked about. Will the product last a really long time? But when you think about these other markets, if you put a LiDAR on a train, if you put it on a boat, if you put it in a traffic intersection, it's going to be out in the weather. It's going to be in all sorts of changing conditions, and the unit needs to be ruggedized. So the fact that we have been operating within this automotive ecosystem and really from the ground up, we're thinking in this direction, it's really allowed us to build a fabulous product.
We've been now 2 years into a pandemic. Obviously, that's why we're doing this broadcast virtually. And then if you've looked at any of the headlines, obviously the supply chain crunch has been making headlines left and right. So with your predictions for 2022, Rick, from your vantage point, how do you see COVID, and how do you see supply chain disruptions? How does that affect AEye's business model? Give us your thoughts there.
Well, look, COVID obviously has affected everyone, and we're learning to deal with it. It's been a couple of years now. We're bobbing and weaving between variants at this point.
Right.
But we've had to change somewhat the supply chain model, right? And so when you think about the supply chain, right, the supply chain is, we have you have sub-assemblies, and those are made of parts, and those
Mhm.
parts are made of everything from your semiconductors to glues and screws, and then the sub-assemblies are put into assemblies, and the assemblies are then tested, and then shipped, and there's logistics and all of that. So it really is this really long chain
Right.
for manufacturing, and the supply model, which at one point was just in time inventory, where
Sure.
you could just order and the product would come in and you were on a cadence. Now for critical items, you're going to need to pre-order. You're going to need to keep inventory a little bit longer than before.
Sure.
In 2022, we expect that vendors, suppliers, and manufacturing partners are going to start getting back into form. If for no other reason, they're adapting. They're adapting to this post-pandemic world. Hopefully, it's a post-pandemic world.
Yes.
But I see the later half of 2022, barring any unforeseen complications, feeling a lot more like the later half of 2019, which was really
Right.
the last normal product manufacturing timeframe that I can remember.
Sure. Rick, and as you're talking about this, something that comes to my mind anyway, over the last 2 days, I've talked to a number of your colleagues about autonomous trucking, and they all reference COVID. They all reference the supply chain,
Yep.
just with the very things that you're saying. So, because that's been such a big topic of discussion over the last 2 days, give me your thoughts on autonomous trucking, and let's kind of have that conversation a little bit.
Well, I think autonomous trucking is a fantastic deployment of this technology. The idea that you can there are these tasks that human beings may not necessarily be so great at, right?
Mhm.
And that is this long term. You're on a road and you're driving, and the conditions are the same for hundreds of miles. This is where I think it's a great deployment of the technology, and
Yes.
you want your sensors to really be able to inform the control systems, accurately. And this is where I think LiDAR plays a huge role. It's a deterministic product.
Sure.
The ability to say, okay, if I send out a light beam
Mhm.
and I get a beam back, and I
Right.
know how far away it is, and I know what the reflectivity is of that object, something is there. It's a very deterministic type of a sensor. And so when you combine that with these very large vehicles, and you have this deterministic sensor system, it's just a really incredibly strong match. And I think that when you think of the value that it brings to the entire industry, to be able to say that autonomous trucking is going to solve the truck driver shortage problems, it's
Sure.
going to be a safer way to move product. Not that truck drivers aren't safe. Truck drivers are extremely skilled, and
Sure. Sure.
they're very good. But accidents do happen. We hope that we'll be able to reduce that accident rate, even with the long haul trucking industry, because of LiDAR. So I think it's just a fabulous deployment of autonomous technology, and really a good place to get the technology deployed sooner than it might be in passenger vehicles, for example.
Right. So, Rick, we have these economic considerations. We've got autonomous trucking. We've got, again, many of your colleagues who have talked about autonomous rail and ITS, and obviously automobiles. So, you have all these avenues for LiDAR to be deployed. You have said in the past that 2022 is really a year for LiDAR players to prove themselves, that this is a very important year. Let's talk about that, and let's explain, why that is the case.
Yeah, I think that 2022 is really the year where we have the right product at the right cost with the right manufacturing ramps to volume production, right? That's the path, right? So we anticipate that 2022 is going to be the year where the LiDAR proves its value. I mean, our customers want LiDAR that can adapt to a wide variety of use cases. The world isn't static. We've talked about that many times. Weather changes, road conditions vary, traffic conditions vary. You have rain, you have fog, you have snow, you have dust. Are you driving in a rural environment, a country environment, a highway environment, a city drive? It's all different, right? So to be able to have your LiDAR sensor to be able to adapt deterministically, to be able to say, okay, the sensor is going to change the way that it's viewing the world based upon these varying conditions, all providing high value data to the control systems or the vehicle, that the systems that are controlling brake, throttle, and steering. This is high value, and this is what we're delivering in 2022. That's what we mean by, we believe it's the year to prove value to LiDAR players, to say this long range adaptive LiDAR is the right product at the right time with the right cost, et cetera, et cetera. This is the year, in my opinion.
Right. Rick, I've spent the bulk of my career in automotive retail. I started at a dealership and then, worked in experiential marketing. So I've been on auto show teams, and as new technologies have come out, and a really good one is adaptive cruise control. So to use an ADAS technology, in 2009, when I was working for Ford, I was working at a Ford dealership in Sioux Falls Ford in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Adaptive cruise control was only on the high-end Lincoln, the MKS, and none of the Ford vehicles had it. But over time, as it started to become more commonplace, at first consumers were a little leery about it, but then eventually they became pretty savvy. And as I moved through automotive retail and through the auto show, touring the auto show, the adaptive cruise control just kind of became just another feature. Consumers became very savvy about it. So adaptive cruise control and adaptive LiDAR now. So do you think we'll ever reach a point like that where consumers will become savvy about adaptive LiDAR like they may be about some other vehicle features?
Carl, that's a really great question. And when you think about it, the mark of most great technologies is that it's all but invisible, right? But it's crazy reliable and it provides tremendous value. When you think about, I grew up with a landline telephone, right? Okay. You picked up the phone. You never even thought about the fact whether you're going to get a dial tone or not. You got a dial tone, right?
Yes.
In fact, the power went out. You got a dial tone. You still could call people, right? Yeah. So the technology, when the technology all of a sudden provides enormous value, but is almost invisible to you, that's sort of that transition point. But you want it to work perfectly every time. And I think that what's going to happen moving forward, I think that consumers are going to be savvy about the lack of LiDAR, right? And how that impacts safety. Are they going to walk into a dealership and say, does this car have LiDAR? I believe quite a few people might, because there's been so much press and information about LiDAR and about how it is a superior sensor and how it relates to safety. But I think that the lack of LiDAR is really going to be the issue, not the addition of LiDAR. And like I said before, AEye's LiDAR is concretely deterministic, right? So, having our LiDAR on a vehicle as the eyes of the autonomous mechanism simply means a safer vehicle. Full stop. Right. That's period. That's what it means, right? In the end, the AEye's LiDAR, it just does its job. And it means that the vehicle performs perfectly and safely, and the user doesn't even have to think about it. It's just there, right? And so I believe that is really what's going to happen. I think that eventually consumers are just going to expect that the vehicle has the necessary sensors in order to keep them safe, that it will avoid accidents, that it will keep the car in the lane, it'll keep you from changing a lane improperly and sideswiping, it'll keep you from accidentally hitting a bicyclist or a child, crossing the street unexpectedly or whatever. It will just simply become a part of your daily life, and you'll just at some point wonder how you ever got along without it. And that's the mark of any great technology, and that's going to be the mark of the AEye LiDAR.
And Rick, I got to tell you, that's what I see too. Just based on my experience in automotive retail, I've seen, features like heated seats, right? They were only in luxury vehicles, or you had to have the highest trim level. And today that's not the
That's
case.
right.
Heated seats, those technologies that used to just be luxury, you just used to be the highest trim levels. They are now in, and you see this with ADAS features too, particularly how automakers bundle ADAS features and they make it standard across their whole product line. So
Exactly right.
much like a consumer would go into a dealership and say, wow, yeah, definitely. I cannot, I live in Michigan and Detroit. So I can't have a car without heated seats. I must have heated seats, or I must have, the connectivity. I could see people saying, yes, I must have the LiDAR because I've owned one vehicle with it. And just like heated seats, I can't see myself living without it. I see that same thing, Rick. I really do.
I agree. I absolutely agree. I think that that's going to be, again, and again, hopefully what happens is the technology just sort of melts into the background. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to worry about it. It's there. You know that it keeps you safe. You feel comfortable putting your family, your kids into that vehicle because you know that it has a LiDAR.
Right. And more, and then you get into the AEye's LiDAR. So not just any LiDAR, but an adaptive LiDAR,
Absolutely.
which is a whole nother vantage point, of explaining that to a consumer to say, look, this is a technology that thinks like you do, perceives like you do.
Yeah.
And it's been proven in rail, been proven in ITS, and has been proven in aerospace and defense. And in my experience, if anything, if a technology comes over from military and aerospace, it automatically has a built-in credibility. So, I can see with consumers.
I totally agree. I've always, it is Pollyanna to think that one sensor fits all, right? So the fact that you can have one scanning modality and it's going to be it all, the scanning modality has to be able to change. The AEye LiDAR is not just a single LiDAR. It is a almost infinite number of different types of LiDAR in a package, right?
Yes.
So by using the ability to use artificial intelligence, machine learning, to be able to analyze the scene, to be able to change the way that you scan the world, that is absolutely what is required. You're totally right. It's not just any LiDAR. It is the AEye LiDAR for sure.
Rick, I feel like I could talk to you all day. We've got to wrap up to continue the rest of our live stream. However, do you have any final thoughts before we call it a day here?
Well, my final thoughts are, look, we talked about 2022 being a proving ground for LiDAR. I'm really excited about the fact that the AEye product, our partners with Continental, our automotive grade LiDAR is going to be making its debut. Even now, Conti is showing the HRL 131. We're really excited about that. We're excited about the our industrial mobility LiDAR as well, being those. It's a derivative to a large degree of this automotive grade system. It's just going to be a super exciting year. I think that 2022, 2023 are going to be incredible years for AEye and for LiDAR, and we're just really looking forward to the tremendous growth that comes with that.
That's fantastic, Rick. So I'll look forward to doing this interview next year at this time, and then we can talk about all that growth and development. Rick, thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, sir.
Still ahead, our closing remarks. That live stream will begin here shortly at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 p.m. Eastern. We'll do our closing remarks for the day, which you can catch across all of AEye's social media channels, including Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. I am told from our AEye command center that the closing remarks session may or may not take place on LinkedIn just due to some technical difficulties. But regardless, you can catch the closing remarks on our other social media channels, again, including Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Closing remarks just ahead here at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern. This is live with AEye Virtual CES 2022.